Lieutenant Sarah Chen stepped off the transport truck at Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado, California, her boots hitting the dusty ground with quiet confidence. The sun blazed overhead as she surveyed the sprawling military base that would be her new home. At 28 years old, Sarah had worked harder than most to earn her place here, but she knew what was coming. She'd heard the stories about how SEALs treated newcomers, especially women in specialized roles. Sarah wasn't a SEAL herself. That elite brotherhood remained closed to women in combat roles at this particular unit. But as a military working dog handler being temporarily assigned to their base, she'd be working alongside them daily. Her job was to train and manage the K-9 units that supported SEAL operations. It was a position she'd earned through years of dedication, but she knew that wouldn't matter to some of them. The Virginia Beach Naval Base sprawled before her as she drove through the gates that first morning, her rusty pickup truck looking out of place among the sleek vehicles in the parking lot. At 28, Staff Sergeant Maya Reeves had seen her share of doubt and dismissal. Being a woman in the military came with its own set of challenges, but being a female K-9 handler in Special Operations Support, that was a whole different battle. She pulled up to the training facility, a sprawling complex of buildings and obstacle courses nestled against the Virginia coastline. The salt air mixed with the scent of pine from the surrounding woods. This was her new assignment, working with Naval Special Warfare Group, providing K-9 support for SEAL teams. Maya stepped out of her truck, her boots hitting the pavement with quiet confidence. At 5'6" with her dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun, she knew she didn't look like what these operators expected. She'd grown used to that over her 8 years in the military. The K-9 facility sat on the eastern edge of the base, a sprawling compound of training fields and obstacle courses. She could already see a group of SEALs gathered near the main building, their casual postures and crossed arms telegraphing skepticism before she'd even introduced herself. Staff Sergeant Maya Rodriguez had seen that look before. She'd seen it at her first duty station, at her first deployment, at every new assignment. The look that said, "You don't belong here." "That's her," one of them muttered, loud enough to be heard. Maya kept her spine straight and her duffel bag secure on her shoulder as she approached the group. Naval Special Warfare Group facilities in Coronado, California, weren't known for their warm welcomes, but she'd expected at least basic professionalism. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Sergeant Maya Rodriguez, K-9 unit transfer from Fort Benning." The tallest of the SEALs, a broad-shouldered man with a crew cut, looked her up and down with barely concealed amusement. His name tape read Garrison. "Another diversity hire," he muttered to his buddy, just loud enough for her to hear. Maya kept her expression neutral. She'd heard worse during her 8 years in the Army, much worse. "Listen up," barked Commander Pierce, a weathered man in his 50s who ran the K-9 training program at Naval Base Coronado. "This is Specialist Tours. She's here on temporary assignment from Fort Bragg to assist with our K-9 unit expansion." The 5 Navy SEALs standing in the morning sun didn't bother hiding their skepticism. The tallest one, who introduced himself as Lieutenant Briggs, looked her up and down with barely concealed disdain. "With all due respect, sir," Briggs said to the commander, "we requested an experienced handler. Not," he gestured vaguely at Maya Torres, who stood at attention in her crisp fatigues, "whatever this is." Maya kept her expression neutral, though her jaw tightened slightly. At 28, she'd heard it all before. Too young, too small, too female, the list went on. "Staff Sergeant Torres has more K-9 experience than anyone on this base," Commander Phillips said firmly. "She'll be conducting your team's certification trials this week." The SEAL standing beside Lieutenant Jake Morrison, callsign Hawk, let out a barely concealed snort. His name was Derek Chen, and his smirk said everything his mouth didn't need to. "With all due respect, sir," said Chief Petty Officer Marcus Dane, stepping forward. He was broad-shouldered, confident, and clearly the leader of this particular SEAL team. We requested an experienced handler, someone who's been in the field. Staff Sergeant Alina Reyes has more operational experience than anyone on this base, Commander Hastings replied sharply. She'll be evaluating your unit's K-9 readiness. That's final. Alina stood at attention, her expression neutral despite the barely concealed smirks from the 5 Navy SEALs before her. At 5'4" and 130 pounds, she knew what they saw. A small woman who looked too young for her rank, someone who didn't belong in their world of elite operators. Fort Bragg's K-9 training facility had seen its share of skeptics, but Alina Rodriguez had learned long ago that proving herself was part of the job. At 28, she'd spent 6 years as a military working dog handler and trainer, earning her reputation quietly, without fanfare. She didn't need their respect right away. She'd earn it the hard way, like always. "You've got to be kidding me," muttered Chief Petty Officer Derek Mason, crossing his arms as he sized up the woman standing before his SEAL team. "They sent us a girl." Alina Rodriguez kept her expression neutral, her dark eyes steady as she faced the 6 men gathered in the training yard at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. The California sun beat down on the compound, but she didn't flinch. She'd heard worse than whatever was coming. "With all due respect, Chief," she said evenly, "I'm not a girl. I'm Petty Officer 2nd Class Martinez, and I'm here to evaluate your unit's K-9 integration capabilities." The men around her exchanged glances. Some smirked. The tallest one, a muscular SEAL named Briggs, crossed his arms. "Ma'am, no disrespect, but we've been working with military dogs for 15 years. We don't need some desk jockey teaching us our job." Sarah Martinez kept her expression neutral, though her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. At 32, she'd heard every variation of dismissal the military could offer. Her slight frame and quiet demeanor had always made men underestimate her, right up until they saw what she could do. "I'm not here to teach," she said evenly. "I'm here to evaluate." The 6 Navy SEALs standing in the dusty training yard of Naval Base Coronado exchanged glances. The morning sun beat down on the California facility, casting long shadows across the K-9 training grounds. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, the team leader, crossed his arms and smirked. "Evaluate us," he laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the quiet morning air. "Lady, we've been working with military dogs for 10 years. What's some Pentagon pencil pusher gonna teach us?" Lieutenant Sarah Chen kept her expression neutral, though her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. At 32, she'd heard variations of this speech more times than she cared to count. The Navy SEAL team stood in a loose semicircle around her, arms crossed, faces skeptical. She was 5'6" in her boots, a full head shorter than most of them, with her dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun. "I'm not here to teach you anything," she said evenly. "I'm here to evaluate your K-9 program." The tallest of them, a broad-shouldered SEAL named Garrett, laughed. "Evaluate? Ma'am, with all due respect, we've been running war dogs for 15 years. 17, corrected another SEAL, Martinez, crossing his arms. "And we've never needed some desk jockey from D.C. to tell us how to do our jobs." Lieutenant Emma Reeves stood in the dust of Fort Campbell's K-9 training facility, her compact frame dwarfed by the 4 Navy SEALs towering around her. The August heat shimmered off the Tennessee tarmac, but she kept her expression neutral. She'd heard worse than their barely concealed scoffs and dismissive glances. "Ma'am, with all due respect," the tallest one, Chief Petty Officer Marcus Webb, said in a tone that suggested no respect at all, "we've been running K-9 ops for 15 years. We don't need some consultant telling us how to work with our dogs." Lieutenant Sarah Chen kept her voice steady. "I'm not here to tell you how to do your job. I'm here to evaluate the integration protocols for the new MWDs." "Military working dogs," another SEAL muttered. "Lady knows the acronyms, impressive." Sarah had heard it all before. At 28, she'd worked with more dogs than most of these men had seen combat missions, but her 5'4" frame and quiet demeanor made her an easy target. She'd learned long ago that proof spoke louder than arguments. The team leader, Commander Mark Fisher, stepped forward. He was tall, weathered, with eyes that had seen too much. "Look, Lieutenant, no disrespect, but we've been working with K-9s for years. We don't need some desk jockey from, where are you from again?" "I trained at Lackland Air Force Base, then spent 3 years in Afghanistan with the K-9 unit," Sarah said evenly. "After that, 2 years developing new training protocols at Coronado." "Coronado," one of the younger SEALs perked up. "That's our base." "I know." Fisher crossed his arms. "Then you know we take our dogs seriously. These aren't pets. They're weapons, tools, brothers. You can't just walk in here and—" "I'm not walking in," Sarah interrupted quietly. "I was assigned by Admiral Hendricks. If you have a problem with that, take it up with him." The mention of the Admiral's name shifted something in the room. Fisher's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. "Fine. You want to evaluate our protocols. Let's see what you've got. We're running exercises this afternoon. Zeus could use a workout." Sarah knew the name. Zeus, a Belgian Malinois with a reputation for aggression and an impressive takedown record. She'd reviewed every dog's file before arriving at the Naval Special Warfare Base in Virginia Beach. Zeus was talented but volatile, with 3 handlers in 2 years. "I'm not here to handle your dogs," Sarah began. "No," Fisher smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Then what exactly are you here for, Lieutenant? Because from where I'm standing, you're wasting valuable training time. Tell you what, you show us you know what you're talking about, and maybe we'll listen to your evaluation. Fail, and you can report back to the Admiral that we're doing just fine without supervision." It was a test, a setup. Sarah could see it in their faces, the smirks, the crossed arms, the way they'd already dismissed her. They expected her to refuse, to hide behind her rank or her clipboard. They wanted her to fail. "What kind of exercise?" she asked. Fisher's smile widened. "Simple. Zeus runs a standard aggression drill. You play the target. If you can handle it without freezing or running, we'll hear you out. If not," he shrugged, "maybe you're better suited for poodle grooming." The other SEALs chuckled. Sarah looked at each of them in turn, reading body language, assessing intent. This wasn't just about proving herself. This was about whether she'd have any credibility here at all. "Zeus is a 75-pound Malinois with documented handler aggression issues," Sarah said calmly. "You're asking me to face him in an attack scenario without proper safety protocols or preparation. That's not training. That's hazing." "That's the job," Fisher countered. "Our guys face worse than one dog every single mission. If you can't handle this, you can't evaluate us." Sarah held his gaze. Behind the challenge, she saw something else, doubt, perhaps even concern. He didn't actually want her to get hurt. This was about hierarchy, about trust, about proving she belonged in their world. And she did belong. She just needed to show them. The afternoon sun beat down on the training compound as Sarah followed the team to the K-9 facility. The Virginia Beach base sprawled across acres of carefully maintained grounds, obstacle courses, shooting ranges, and specialized buildings designed for the intense training SEAL teams required. The K-9 unit occupied a corner of the compound, kennels arranged in precise rows with attached outdoor runs. The sound of barking echoed across the space as they approached. Sarah's trained ear picked out different tones: excitement, boredom, territorial warnings. And then she heard him, Zeus, a deep, aggressive bark that made the younger SEALs exchange glances. "That's him," Fisher said unnecessarily. "As you can hear, he's got a strong presence." Strong presence. That was one way to put it. Sarah had read Zeus's file 3 times. 4 years old, imported from a breeder in Belgium, trained initially for police work before being brought into the military program. Excellent nose, incredible drive but human aggression issues that bordered on dangerous. His last handler had requested a transfer after Zeus bit through his protective sleeve and into his arm. They stopped at a kennel at the end of the row. Inside, Zeus paced, a beautiful Malinois with a dark face and alert ears. He moved with controlled power, muscles rippling under his short coat. When he saw them, he lunged at the fence, teeth bared. "Easy boy," Fisher said, but he stepped back. Sarah didn't move. She watched Zeus carefully, reading his body language. The aggression was real, but underneath it she saw something else. Confusion, frustration. A dog that had been trained to do a job but had never found the right partner to do it with. "Who's been working with him recently?" she asked. "Petty Officer Jenkins," Fisher said, nodding toward a muscular man in his 30s. "Good handler. Zeus just never bonded." Jenkins shifted uncomfortably. "He knows his commands, he performs, he's unpredictable, doesn't trust." Sarah nodded slowly. Trust. That was the word that mattered. Zeus didn't trust because he'd never been given reason to. He'd been passed from handler to handler, each one trying to dominate him, to break him into submission rather than building a partnership. "The drill is simple," Fisher explained, leading her away from the kennel to a large outdoor training area. "You'll stand in the center. We'll release Zeus. He'll be given the command to apprehend. You defend yourself using the protective equipment. When we call him off, he should release immediately. That's the test. Can you handle the initial contact without panicking, and does Zeus respond to commands under pressure?" "And if he doesn't release?" Sarah asked. Fisher's expression went carefully neutral. "That's why we have the catch pole. But don't worry, Lieutenant. We wouldn't actually let you get hurt. This is just to prove a point." "Which is?" "That working with these dogs isn't something you can learn from a textbook. It's instinct. It's earned. You either have it or you don't." Sarah looked at the protective equipment laid out. A heavy padded sleeve, chest protector, leg guards. Standard gear, but Zeus had bitten through it before. She thought about refusing, about pointing out that this wasn't protocol, that it violated about 10 different safety regulations. But she'd fought too hard to get here. If she backed down now, they'd never respect her. And without respect, she couldn't do her job. These men needed better K9 integration protocols. Dogs like Zeus needed better training methods. The work mattered more than her pride. "I'll do it," she said, "but on one condition." Fisher raised an eyebrow. "You're not really in a position to negotiate." "I do the drill twice. Once your way with the protective gear, then once my way without it." The SEALs erupted in protests. "That's insane," Jenkins said. "Zeus could seriously hurt you." "Your way proves I can handle fear," Sarah continued calmly. "My way proves I understand the dog. That's the real test, isn't it? Whether I actually know what I'm doing." Fisher studied her for a long moment. "If you get hurt then, I guess you'd better hope your training worked," Sarah said with a slight smile. "That Zeus really does respond to commands when it matters." She could see Fisher weighing his options. He'd boxed himself into a corner. If he refused, he'd look like he didn't trust his own protocols. If he agreed and she got hurt, there would be hell to pay. But if he agreed and she succeeded. "All right," he said finally. "But we do it my way first. Full protective gear, standard drill. You prove you can handle that, we'll talk about round 2. Sarah nodded. She began strapping on the protective equipment, feeling the weight of it, the restriction of movement. The other SEALs watched in silence now, the jokes and smirks fading. Whether they liked her or not, she was about to put herself in real danger for their test. "You really trained at Coronado?" asked one of the younger team members, a baby-faced SEAL named Morrison. 2 years, Sarah confirmed, adjusting the arm sleeve. "Did you know Chief Richards, K9 unit?" Sarah paused. "Tom Richards, yeah, good man, retired last year." "He's my uncle," Morrison said quietly. "He always said the best handlers were the ones who understood the dogs were partners, not tools." Your uncle's a smart man. Fisher interrupted. We ready? Jenkins brings Zeus out. Hostile apprehension scenario, full aggression. Sarah walked to the center of the training area. The packed dirt was smooth, worn down by countless exercises. Around the perimeter the SEALs gathered, some leaning against the fence, others standing with arms crossed. A few pulled out their phones, probably to record what they expected to be her failure. She took a breath, centered herself, felt the weight of the protective gear, the sun on her face. In the distance, she heard Jenkins opening Zeus's kennel, heard the dog's excited bark as he realized he was going to work. Then Zeus appeared around the corner, Jenkins holding him on a short lead. The dog's entire body was tense, focused. He'd spotted Sarah in the center of the ring. He knew this game. Release position, Fisher called out. Jenkins walked Zeus to the entry point, 30 yards from where Sarah stood. The dog was vibrating with anticipation, his eyes locked on her. Last chance to back out, Fisher said to Sarah. She shook her head. I'm good. Your funeral, Jenkins on my mark, 3, 2, 1, release. Jenkins dropped the lead and shouted, Zeus, apprehend. The dog exploded forward. 75 pounds of muscle and training and barely contained aggression, covering the distance in seconds. Sarah had a heartbeat to brace herself. The impact drove Sarah back 3 steps. Zeus's teeth clamped onto the protective sleeve with crushing force, his growl vibrating through the padding. She felt the power in his jaw, the way he shook his head to destabilize her. This was what he'd been bred for, trained for taking down threats. Hold position, Fisher shouted from the sideline. Don't fight him. But Sarah wasn't fighting. She was reading the tension in Zeus's body, the way his back legs adjusted for leverage, the pattern of his breathing between growls. This wasn't a dog out of control. This was a dog doing exactly what he'd been taught. The problem was what he'd been taught. Zeus out, Jenkins commanded, out. Zeus ignored him, his teeth grinding deeper into the sleeve. Sarah felt the pressure increasing, felt the padding compress. Another few seconds and he'd be through to her arm. Zeus out, Jenkins tried again, his voice rising. Nothing. The dog held on, committed to the bite, unwilling to release. Catch pole, Fisher ordered. Get ready to. Wait, Sarah said, her voice calm despite the 75 pounds of aggression attached to her arm. Give me a second. Lieutenant, he's not releasing. I said wait. Sarah shifted her weight, stopped resisting against Zeus's pull. Instead, she moved with him, letting his momentum carry them in a small circle. The dog adjusted, confused by the change in dynamic. His grip loosened slightly, not much but enough. Then Sarah did something that made every SEAL on the perimeter tense up. She dropped to one knee, bringing herself down to Zeus's level. Easy, she said softly, directly to the dog. Easy boy, job's done, you got me. Good boy, you did good. Her voice was different now, not the firm command voice handlers used, but something gentler. A tone Zeus hadn't heard in this context before. His ears flicked forward, still holding the bite but listening. Good Zeus, strong Zeus. You can let go now, it's okay. She shifted again, taking pressure off the sleeve. In the dog's mind, he'd won. The threat was down, submissive. The fight was over. Slowly, incrementally, his jaw relaxed. That's it, Sarah murmured. Good boy, release, easy release. Zeus let go. He stepped back, tongue lolling, looking almost confused. His tail gave a tentative wag, the first sign of anything except aggression that most of these men had ever seen from him. Zeus, come, Jenkins called out, relief in his voice. But Zeus didn't go to Jenkins. He sat down in front of Sarah, head tilted, studying her. The training yard was silent. Sarah slowly stood, carefully removing the protective sleeve. Her arm was intact, bruised definitely, but unbroken. She looked at Fisher. That's your problem, she said quietly. He's been trained to bite, but not to trust. Every handler treats the release as a battle of wills. He holds on longer because he thinks he has to, because no one's ever told him he did a good job before asking him to stop. Fisher started, then stopped. That's not standard protocol. I know, your protocol trains attack dogs. My protocol would train partners. She looked down at Zeus, who was still sitting, still watching her with those intelligent eyes. Zeus isn't aggressive. He's insecure. He doesn't trust his handlers because his handlers don't trust him. Jenkins stepped forward slowly. Zeus, come, he said again, more gently this time. The dog looked at Sarah, then reluctantly went to Jenkins, who clipped the lead back on. Round 2, Sarah said, beginning to unbuckle the protective gear. No equipment. Lieutenant, Fisher began. You wanted proof I know what I'm doing. That was proof I can survive. This is proof I can actually work with him. If you get hurt. Commander, respectfully, I've been doing this longer than you think. Zeus and I understand each other now. Don't we, boy? The dog's ears pricked forward at her voice. Fisher looked at his team, then at Jenkins, then back at Sarah. This is a mistake. Probably, Sarah agreed, pulling off the last piece of padding. She stood in just her duty uniform now, no protection at all. But it's my mistake to make. She walked back to the center of the ring. Without the bulk of the protective gear, she looked even smaller, more vulnerable. Morrison whispered something that sounded like a prayer. Jenkins, Sarah called out, bring him to the start position. Ma'am, I really don't think. Trust me and trust Zeus. He's a good dog who's been set up to fail. Let's give him a chance to succeed. Jenkins looked at Fisher, who nodded grimly. They walked Zeus back to the release point. The dog was calmer now, less frantic but still focused on Sarah. Same command, Jenkins asked. No, Sarah said. Different command, tell him to find me. Find you? Yes, it's a search command. Less aggressive context. Just tell him Zeus find. Fisher stepped closer to the fence. If this goes wrong. It won't. But Sarah's heart was pounding. This was the real test, not of her courage, but of her ability to read dogs, to understand their psychology, to know when a dog could be trusted and when it couldn't. She'd seen Zeus's file, watched him for all of 30 seconds at his kennel, and observed one bite drill. She was betting her safety on that analysis. Ready, Jenkins called out. Sarah nodded. She stood relaxed, arms at her sides, no defensive posture. Zeus find. Jenkins released the lead. Zeus ran forward, powerful strides eating up the distance. But his body language was different, ears up instead of back, mouth slightly open instead of snarling. He was working, but not attacking. He reached Sarah and stopped, sat down in front of her, looked up expectantly. The training yard erupted in shocked murmurs. Sarah smiled, reached into her pocket slowly, and pulled out a training treat she'd grabbed from the K-9 facility on the way over. She offered it to Zeus, who took it gently. Good find, she said softly. Good boy, Zeus, you're such a good boy. Then she did something that made every handler present hold their breath. She reached out and touched Zeus's head, scratched behind his ears. The dog that was supposedly too aggressive to trust leaned into the touch, his tail wagging. How the hell, Fisher breathed. Sarah looked up at the assembled SEALs. Zeus isn't the problem, the training is. You've taught him that every human interaction is a fight, that he has to win or he's failed. But dogs don't think like that. They want partnership, leadership, trust. Give them that and they'll give you everything. She walked toward the fence, Zeus trotting beside her, no lead, no commands. Just a dog following someone he decided was worth following. Your evaluation is going to recommend significant changes to the K-9 integration program, Sarah continued, her voice carrying across the silent training yard. Not because you're doing bad work, you're not. You've created incredible working dogs, but you've forgotten they're not just tools. They're living beings that need the same things we do: respect, trust, Partnership. Morrison was grinning now. A few other SEALs were nodding slowly, reassessing, but not everyone was convinced. That was a parlor trick, one of the older team members called out, a grizzled SEAL named Patterson. One moment with one dog doesn't prove anything about running actual operations. Fair point, Sarah acknowledged. She reached the fence and Jenkins clipped a lead on Zeus, though the dog showed no inclination to leave her side. So let me tell you about Afghanistan, about a Malinois named Ajax and a mission that went wrong. The team gathered in the briefing room as evening shadows stretched across the base. Sarah had been invited, grudgingly by some, enthusiastically by others, to debrief over coffee. Zeus had been returned to his kennel. But not before every member of the team had witnessed him following Sarah like a shadow, calm and responsive in a way they'd never seen. Fisher sat at the head of the table, still processing what he'd witnessed. "Tell us about Afghanistan," he said finally, "about Ajax." Sarah wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. She'd told this story before, in official reports, in therapy sessions, but never to an audience like this. These men had seen combat, lost brothers, understood the weight of decisions made in the field. "It was 2022, she began. "I was attached to an army unit in Kandahar province. We had 6 dogs in rotation, all trained for IED detection and patrol work. Ajax was mine, a 3-year-old Malinois with the best nose in the unit." She paused, seeing Ajax in her mind. The way he'd greet her every morning, the absolute focus he'd show on patrol, the way he'd curl up next to her cot at night despite regulations saying he should be in the kennels. "We got called out for a night mission. Intel said there was a Taliban cell operating out of a compound about 5 clicks from our base. Standard raid, get in, secure the location, extract any high-value targets. My job was to clear the compound for explosives before the main force entered." Morrison leaned forward. "Just you and the dog?" "And a 2-man security team. That was protocol. Handler doesn't enter unknown territory alone." Sarah's jaw tightened. "But when we got there, the team leader made a judgment call. The compound looked deserted. Thermal imaging showed no heat signatures inside. He wanted to move fast, get the mission done. He ordered me to wait outside while they cleared the building." "Let me guess," Fisher said quietly. "It wasn't deserted." Ajax knew. The second they breached the door, he started alerting. Not his IED alert, his threat alert, human presence. But the team was already inside and suddenly there was gunfire. Lots of it. The compound wasn't empty. It was a trap. Taliban fighters had been waiting in a bunker below the main structure, thermal shielded. The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Sarah took a breath. "I should have waited for orders, should have followed protocol. But I could hear men screaming, hear the firefight, and I knew Ajax could help. He could find the shooters in the dark, could locate wounded friendlies. So I made a choice. I unclipped his lead and gave him the command. Ajax, find threat." "You sent him in alone," Jenkins said, understanding dawning. "He was faster than me, better in the dark. He went in like a missile and I heard shouts, heard a weapon discharge. By the time I got inside, Ajax had taken down 2 Taliban fighters. The security team was pinned down but alive. Ajax's intervention gave them the seconds they needed to regroup." "That's incredible," Morrison said. "That's half the story," Sarah replied, her voice flat. "While Ajax was clearing one room, more fighters came up from the bunker. They had automatic weapons. Ajax tried to hold them, tried to protect the team. He took 3 bullets." The silence that followed was heavy. These men knew loss. They'd all lost teammates, brothers. But there was something about losing a dog, a creature that trusted absolutely, that fought without understanding politics or ideology, that gave everything because you asked them to. "Did he make it?" Morrison asked softly. "Barely. We got him to the base surgeon. They worked on him for 6 hours. When he finally stabilized, he'd lost his right front leg and had permanent nerve damage to his spine. He couldn't work anymore. Sarah's voice caught slightly. I requested to adopt him when he was retired from service. Spent the next year helping him adjust to 3 legs, managing his pain, watching him go from this proud working dog to. She didn't finish, didn't need to. Where is he now? Fisher asked. My parents' farm in Montana. He's got 20 acres to roam, a warm bed, and all the treats he can eat. He's happy, but he's not a working dog anymore, and that's on me. That's not on you, Patterson said firmly. The grizzled SEAL who'd challenged her earlier was shaking his head. You made a combat decision. You saved your team. I broke protocol. I sent my dog into a situation I should have cleared myself, and he paid the price. And if you hadn't, Fisher asked, if you'd waited, followed protocol while your team was pinned down. Sarah met his eyes. They'd have died, all 3 of them. Ajax saved their lives. Then he did his job, and you did yours. The fact that you carry the guilt that you retired him with honor, that you're here trying to make sure other handlers don't face the same impossible choices, that's what makes you good at this. Fisher stood, walked to the window. You know what our problem is, Lieutenant. We train dogs to be weapons, but we forget that weapons don't choose to fight. Ajax chose. He chose to go in. He chose to protect his team. That's not a weapon. That's a hero. That's a partner, Sarah said quietly. That's what I've been trying to tell you. These dogs aren't tools. They're teammates. They deserve to be treated as such. They deserve training that respects their intelligence, their emotions, their capacity for choice. Jenkins spoke up. What happened to the soldiers, the ones Ajax saved? 2 made it home. 1, Corporal Davis, lost his left arm but survived. He sends Ajax birthday cards every year. Sarah smiled slightly. The 3rd one, Sergeant Martinez, recovered fully. He's actually the one who recommended me for this evaluation position. Told the Admiral that if anyone understood the real value of K-9 integration, it was the handler who'd sacrificed her dog to save her team. You didn't sacrifice him, Morrison said. You trusted him. There's a difference. Maybe. Sarah looked around the room. But I learned something from that mission. I learned that the bond between a handler and a dog isn't something you can protocol into existence. It's built on trust, respect, and the understanding that you're asking a living being to put itself in harm's way for you. That's a sacred responsibility. And if we're going to keep using dogs in combat and special operations, we need to honor that responsibility. We need to train handlers to be partners, not just commanders. Fisher turned from the window. Your evaluation is going to gut our current program, isn't it? It's going to recommend significant changes, Sarah admitted. But not because your program is bad, because it can be better, because dogs like Zeus deserve better, because handlers deserve the kind of partner Ajax was, and that only happens with different training methods. Will we lose operational effectiveness? No, you'll gain it. A dog that trusts its handler, that works as part of a team rather than as a tool, is more effective, more reliable, more willing to push beyond training into real partnership. Ajax didn't save those soldiers because he was ordered to. He saved them because he understood we were a team, and teams protect each other. Patterson stood, walked over to Sarah, and extended his hand. I thought you were desk jockey. I was wrong. You're operational. You've been in the shit. You understand. Sarah shook his hand. I understand that every dog we send out there deserves the same respect we give human operators, and every handler deserves the training to make that relationship work. So what do we do about Zeus? Jenkins asked. He's been bounced around for 2 years. How do we fix that? Sarah considered. He needs consistency. One handler, proper time to bond, training that rewards partnership instead of just obedience. He needs what I gave Ajax, trust that he's capable of more than just biting on command. Sounds like he needs you, Morrison said. I'm not here to handle. But you could, Fisher interrupted. You're stationed here for the evaluation, right? 6 months minimum. Zeus needs a handler. You've got the best rapport we've seen. and it would give you insight into the current program from the inside. Sarah hesitated. Taking on Zeus meant responsibility, attachment, risk. It meant putting her heart on the line again after Ajax. But it also meant proving her point, demonstrating that her methods worked, giving this difficult dog a real chance. "All right," she said finally. "I'll take Zeus, but we do it my way. New protocols, new training schedule, and if it works, you implement the same approach across the program." "Deal," Fisher said. He looked around at his team. "Anyone object?" Silence, then Morrison grinned. "I want to see this," Dog whispered Lieutenant, turning Zeus into a puppy. "He's not a puppy," Sarah said firmly. "He's a professional working dog who deserves to be treated like one. That's the whole point." 3 months later, the Virginia Beach morning was crisp as Sarah, and Zeus ran through their patrol exercises. The dog moved beside her with absolute precision, responding to hand signals, voice commands, even subtle shifts in her body language. The transformation was remarkable. But it wasn't magic, it was work. Sarah had spent every day with Zeus, building trust, establishing routine, replacing fear-based training with partnership-based methods. There had been setbacks, moments when Zeus's old patterns resurfaced, when he'd tested boundaries or shown the aggression that had defined his reputation. But each time, Sarah had responded with patience, consistency, and respect. The SEALs had watched the transformation with growing interest. Fisher had authorized Sarah to run training sessions for other handlers, teaching her methods. Not everyone was convinced, but the results spoke for themselves. Zeus wasn't just obedient now. He was engaged, happy, effective in ways he'd never been. "Looking good, Lieutenant," Morrison called from the observation area. He'd become one of Sarah's biggest advocates, often staying after hours to learn her techniques. Sarah finished the exercise and signaled Zeus to sit. The dog dropped immediately, tongue lolling in a happy pant. She pulled out his favorite toy, a rope that was more ragged than rope at this point, and spent a few minutes in play. Reward, not just for commands followed, but for the partnership itself. "Your evaluation's due next week," Fisher said, approaching with a folder. "Admiral wants the final report." "It's ready, most of it anyway." Sarah straightened, wiping sweat from her forehead. "The recommendations are extensive. I've been reading your drafts. You're not pulling punches." "Would you want me to?" "No," Fisher admitted. "Truth is, watching you with Zeus these past months, it's changed how I think about the program. We've been so focused on tactical effectiveness that we forgot these are living beings with emotional needs. Your methods don't just create better working dogs, they create happier ones." "Happy dogs work harder," Sarah said. "They push further, trust deeper, perform better under stress. It's not complicated, it's just human or dog, I guess." Fisher smiled. "The team wants to do something before you submit the report, kind of a demonstration of what you've accomplished. Show the Admiral what integration can look like when it's done right." "What kind of demonstration?" "Full tactical scenario. Live exercise with role players, simulated IEDs, hostage rescue protocol. Zeus would be integrated into the team for the entire operation. We show that your partnership-based approach works in real-world scenarios." Sarah felt a flutter of nerves. It was one thing to run training exercises, another entirely to put Zeus and herself into a high-stress tactical simulation with a SEAL team watching every move. "When?" she asked. "Tomorrow, dawn insertion. The Admiral will be observing." "That's fast." "That's the point. We want to show that Zeus can perform under pressure, with limited prep time, in situations that mirror actual operations. If it works, your evaluation becomes irrefutable. If it doesn't, I look like I've been wasting everyone's time for 3 months, Sarah finished. "Your call, Lieutenant. No one's forcing this." Sarah looked down at Zeus, who was watching her with those intelligent eyes. She thought about Ajax, about the mission in Afghanistan, about all the handlers and dogs who'd come before. This was bigger than her pride or her career. This was about changing a system that needed changing. "We'll do it," she said. "Zeus and I will run the scenario." The next morning came too quickly. Sarah arrived at the staging area to find the entire SEAL team assembled, along with Admiral Hendricks and several other high-ranking officers. The exercise had turned into something bigger than a simple demonstration. It was a test of whether her entire evaluation had merit. "Lieutenant Chen," Admiral Hendricks greeted her. He was in his 60s, weathered and sharp-eyed, a man who'd spent decades in special operations. "Understand you're going to show us something special today." "We're going to show you what partnership looks like, sir." "Looking forward to it." He didn't sound skeptical exactly, but he didn't sound convinced either. Fisher briefed the scenario. Hostage situation in a multi-room structure, unknown number of hostiles, 2 IEDs confirmed in the compound. "Your job, Lieutenant, is to clear a safe path for the team, locate the hostages, and identify any threats Zeus can find. We'll be running hot, live simunition rounds, flashbangs, the works. It'll feel real." Sarah nodded. Beside her, Zeus was alert but calm, reading her body language, ready to work. "Rules of engagement," Fisher continued. "If Zeus alerts to a threat, we treat it as confirmed until proven otherwise. If he alerts to an IED, we halt until it's cleared. You're not support on this mission, Lieutenant, you're integral. Zeus's findings drive our tactics." That was the real test. Not whether Zeus could perform, but whether trained SEALs would trust a dog, and a female handler they dismissed 3 months ago, with their tactical decisions. "Understood," Sarah said. "Team, mount up, we insert in 5. The helicopter ride was short, dropping them a quarter-mile from the target structure. Sarah felt the familiar pre-mission tension, the hyper-awareness that came from knowing real danger was possible even in an exercise. Zeus pressed against her leg, feeding off her energy, ready. "On me," Fisher commanded as they dismounted. The team formed up, weapons ready, moving in tactical formation toward the target. Sarah and Zeus took point, unusual positioning that showed Fisher's trust in her assessment. 50 meters from the structure, Zeus alerted. Hard. He stopped, sat, looked back at Sarah with absolute focus. "IED," Sarah called out softly. "Left of the path, approximately 10 meters. The team halted. A specialist moved forward with detection equipment, scanning where Zeus had indicated. 30 seconds later, confirmed. Anti-personnel mine 3 feet off the path. They marked it and adjusted course. Zeus led them around, then alerted again. Another mine, this one better hidden. 2 for 2. "Good dog," Sarah murmured, giving Zeus his toy for a quick reward before they continued. They reached the structure. Fisher signaled the team into entry positions. Sarah held Zeus back, letting the first wave clear the immediate entry. Then they moved in together. The interior was dim, full of shadows and corners. Zeus's nose worked constantly, processing information faster than any human could. He led Sarah through the first room, past a series of obstacles, then stopped at a closed door. His alert was different this time. Not an IED, not a threat exactly, something else. "Hostage," Sarah called, "behind this door." Fisher moved up, tested the door. Locked. 2 team members breached it, and inside they found 2 role players marked as hostages, hands zip-tied, exactly where Zeus had indicated. "How the hell did he know?" Morrison whispered. "Scent," Sarah replied. "Fear, stress chemicals. He can smell the difference between a hostile and a victim." They continued clearing rooms. Zeus found another IED, identified a hostile hidden in a crawlspace that thermal imaging had missed, and led them directly to a cache of simulated weapons. Every alert was accurate. Every indication proved correct. By the time they'd cleared the entire structure, even the skeptics were believers. Back at the staging area, Admiral Hendricks approached Sarah as she was giving Zeus water and treats. The dog had performed flawlessly, and Sarah's pride in him was overwhelming. "That was remarkable, Lieutenant," the Admiral said. "In 30 years, I've never seen that level of integration. Zeus operated like a full member of the team." "Because he is, sir. That's what my evaluation recommends, treating K9s as team members, not equipment. Training handlers to build partnerships, not just command obedience. Your report is going to require significant resource allocation. New training protocols, revised handler selection criteria, extended bonding periods." "Yes, sir." "It's also going to save lives. Dogs like Zeus, with handlers who understand them the way you do, are force multipliers. Not because they're better weapons, but because they're better partners." He extended his hand. "Your evaluation is approved for immediate implementation. I want you to oversee the program revision." Sarah shook his hand, momentarily speechless. "There's one condition," Hendricks continued. "Zeus stays with you. He's proof of concept. You two are going to be training the next generation of handlers." Later that evening, Sarah sat outside the K9 facility with Zeus sprawled beside her, exhausted and content. Morrison found her there. "Heard the Admiral approved everything," he said, sitting down on the bench. "Heard you're running the new program." "Yeah, it's a lot." "You earned it. You came in here, we treated you like garbage, and you proved every single one of us wrong. That takes guts." Sarah scratched Zeus's ears. "I didn't do it alone. Zeus did the hard work, I just gave him a chance." "That's leadership, Lieutenant, seeing potential others miss, trusting when others doubt." Morrison stood. "My uncle's going to love hearing about this. He always said the best handlers were the ones who saw dogs as partners. You proved him right." After he left, Sarah pulled out her phone. She scrolled to a photo of Ajax, gray-muzzled now, lounging on her parents' porch in Montana. The dog who'd taught her everything, who'd sacrificed so much. She typed a message to her mother. "Today was a good day. Wish Ajax could see Zeus. He'd be proud." The response came quickly. "Ajax knows. He's sleeping on the porch, snoring. He always sleeps better when you've had a good day. He knows." Sarah smiled. Maybe dogs did know. Maybe that connection, that bond, transcended distance and time. Maybe that's what made them partners instead of tools. The understanding that ran deeper than commands, deeper than training, all the way down to trust and love and mutual respect. Zeus stirred, looked up at her with those warm eyes, and placed his head on her lap. She ran her fingers through his fur and watched the sun set over the Virginia Beach base. 3 months ago, these men had tried to break her, to prove she didn't belong. They'd forced her into a confrontation with a dog they thought was dangerous, expecting her to fail. Instead, she'd found a partner, changed a program, earned the respect of the very people who doubted her. And most importantly, she'd given Zeus something he'd never had before: trust, respect, and a real chance to be the incredible dog he was always capable of being.